Jeff, I'm just going to do a quick introduction, then we'll get rolling. But for everybody that's watching live, thank you for joining. I know we're early, so we're just getting started here. We have five awesome, gracious participants who are going to be talking about their retirements as we go, and we're starting here with Jeff. So Jeff, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit? You can give a little context about your question and where we want to head today, and we'll just chat for 15 minutes.
Thank you so much for having me on, Eric. I'm Jeff. I'm just about to turn 56 and have my own savings, but will also have been informed by my elders, 3 different elders, that I will be receiving some inheritance. But the timing and amounts, as you might imagine, are unknown. So I'm trying to figure out how to plan for that when there are so many unknown variables. I can make some reasonable guesses as to some minimums, but it's also how could I factor that in? I'd like to retire sometime probably before 60, maybe even earlier if I can. Yeah. So how does that affect planning? It's a hard question for me to get my head around.
Yeah, certainly. Obviously the really difficult part of planning in general is the unpredictability about everything. And this just adds that extra wrinkle. Are you using financial planning software at all? Do you have experience with Bolden or anything?
Yeah, I'm using Bolden. I've got my data in there. I've got some different scenarios in there. So I am trying to leverage that. I do have, a scenario with and without, and one with like a bigger than what I think the minimum might be and that kind of thing. Yeah.
So I'm going to interpret from that you have tried some version where you don't have the inheritance in it as a scenario,
right,
and then another version where you have layers or levels of the types of inheritance.
Exactly. Yeah. And what it winds up affecting is how much, how early can I retire and how much can I expect to be able to spend? And so that's the tricky part.
Well, tell me, so what would be if in an ideal world, forgetting the lack of clarity, in an ideal world, what would your desired outcome be? Is it like, hey, if I had a high level of certainty that the inheritance were coming, I'd retire tomorrow? Or like, do you hate your job?
No, not necessarily, but I mean, it'd be nice to have that option just in case. I can imagine myself still working for at least another year or two. But might go as long as 60, or it's also nice to have some options if, like, hey, the market's way down and so is my portfolio. I can just work another year or two and not start withdrawing from my portfolio. So I'm kind of looking at it flexible retirement date that way too.
I think that's the prudent way to look at it. To give you a kind of a direct way to approach this is how. So my video yesterday kind of tackles this in some sense. Like, really, I think the way that I would think about this is you've already done the right first step, which is you've got a plan that models a no inheritance scenario and one that models inheritance scenarios. And if you use a tool like Bolden or Income Labs, like any of these that have a guardrails type feature, what will happen is a future income source, like a tax-free income source, like inheritance, will give you a higher early spending capacity, meaning more permission to spend, or it will give you an earlier retirement permission to retire. So there is some issue with that. What I would say is, for now, I would rely exclusively on the fact that there's no inheritance. And I would say what you probably could do is build, and I think you did indicate this in your notes that you sent me in advance. Let me see if it was, maybe that was a different question. But what I would say is what you probably want to do is have your expenses bucket into 3 separate categories. And actually, I'm not reading your notes. You did do that. You have a base, you have like a moderate level of discretionary, and you have like the stuff I don't care about, but if I have it, I'd love to spend it. Mm-hmm. That makes sense. And then if you have a spending capacity generated by the no inheritance scenario, right? So the scenario where there's no additional inflows of family money and it meets the base level, I think that would probably be a sufficient layer to, start to say, hey, I probably could retire on that first scenario. Does that make sense? And then knowing that you'll get that future income source, and it will make maybe that middle category more of a, like, safe, like your base layer.
Right. The part of that makes sense, but the part of that to me that's uncomfortable is like the base level is, pay for groceries, pay the mortgage as long as it lasts. It's going to last for me about 8 or 9 more years. you know, pay the basic expenses, but there's not a lot of buffer. There's
Yeah.
only a tiny bit of buffer there for discretionary fund spending. If I don't, if that's the case, I'd probably want to work a couple more years. But I have been told like I am going to get something, so it doesn't seem realistic to say that that's the right scenario too. I mean, I understand the need to plan for it just in case, but it also seems like it's not realistic. I should maybe have. Does it make sense to have a scenario where I say, kind of like I think I'm going to get at least 500K or something like that, and I plop that in. I think that's a likely baseline minimum that I'll receive, and use that as kind of more my main plan, but make sure that the no inherent scenario still works just in case. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Not to that level of directness, I would say, in the sense that,
Okay.
like, I think I'll just be as direct as I can be. I would, and if I were in your, and I'll give some context for why, because I
Okay.
on the other side of this, I've obviously worked with many clients. I've seen inheritances go well, inheritances not go well. And what I
Mhm.
mean by that is not when it's not go well, it's never like an intentional thing, nor it's just like an unplanned thing. It's another element of an agent of chaos. Let's put it that way. Um,
Mhm.
so the way I would handle this if I were giving advice to a client of mine, it would be we would only make a decision based off of the base plan, which has no
Okay.
inheritance in it. And if the spending capacity can be met such that your base layer of spending is satisfactorily supplied with the right lower guardrail, with the right probabilities of over and under spending, which are our internal metrics. And I can explain some of those, but we don't need that. I'm just illustrating like if the criteria that gave me the comfort to give someone a stamp of approval were met, I would do it only on the base plan with no inheritance.
Okay.
The reason I say that is because inheritance, like what we're really trying to do here is choose our anxiety. There's going to be an anxiety either way. If you
You're right.
include the inheritance, then make the decision, what you're effectively going to do is be anxious until the inheritance comes, and you don't
Mm.
feel that now, but you will feel that when it happens. And I'm telling you that because I've seen that many times and I've seen that play out poorly, right? I've seen people who plan for an inheritance. Their parents live 4 or 5 extra years and then there's nothing left. And that's partly because of the unpredictability of what it costs to like actually fund
Right.
someone's end of life needs and the variance and how long that might last. And so, while I do probably agree with you that there's a high probability of you inheriting some money, given the way you've described it, it's
Yeah.
kind of like pick your poison. And I'm not like an overly conservative person, but in this case, I would be conservative because you're not in control of any of those behaviors. You're not in control of
Yeah.
how they determine their end of life spending, who they're going to choose to gift money to while they're alive, all of those details. So I think in this case, the uncertainty you have now is better than the uncertainty you would inherit or invite into your life if you were to make a decision based off of a retirement scenario that includes a substantial inheritance. And I would factor a $500,000 inheritance as substantial. If it were 50,000, then I would probably give you a different answer because it's not actually enough to move the needle. But part of why we're having the conversation is it's a potentially substantial enough amount of money that you are feeling like it could move the needle for you. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, let me paint the picture in a different
Sure.
way. Kind of like my pre-Social Security bridge years, and I'm approaching the Social Security question like kind of like the retirement date, where I'm somewhat flexible. Like if I get 3 years into retirement and the portfolio is down, the market's down, maybe I take it earlier. But as long as everything's looking okay, I'll push it out as far as I can. Right.
Yeah.
But could I potentially think of that pre-Social Security bridge as I just want to survive that with a minimum amount to be able to fund the rest of my retirement without an inheritance, of course. Um, and not look at like a necessarily a strict withdrawal rate, more of like I want to get to my post Social Security bridge with at least half of my portfolio intact or something along those lines. Is that a decent way to look at that, or is
Yeah.
there holes in that thinking
Actually,
too?
that's actually a really fantastic way to look at it. I think you would still want to model it, and like you want to kind of
Yeah.
know what your guardrails would be. And I don't literally mean in the sense of software guardrails. I mean like what are your boundaries going to be about where you'd cut spending, what that would
Right.
be. But I'm a big fan of that. If I take a small detour, I really like how you've presented that because I think that is what I would call the modern view that I have on retirement planning, which is, if you can imagine like an XY graph like this, hopefully this isn't going to be butchered, but I could draw it. But if you imagine retirement spending or money as an XY curve like this, the old model of retirement spending is you spend very little in the beginning and you increase your spending over the end. And what happens is your portfolio starts high, it doesn't draw down until the very end, which is kind of backwards actually, because what it does, it leaves all the money for the end. What you're describing is actually, I think, much more of like the model that we recommend or I demonstrate online, which is you're going to spend more at the beginning and then you're going to drop your spending as you go. That's actually what the behavioral research shows. And what that means for your portfolio is you're actually going to start high, have a drop in the portfolio, almost like an inverted U, and it'll drop and then it'll come back once your income sources kick in. And that's kind of what you're talking about, if that makes sense. But again, you have the thing with that is it's the reason that's not been popularized is because it requires a certain level of detail that frankly, like people and advisors were not interested in putting into this process. Does that make sense? Like if you were just a traditional AUM advisor, the fees are one thing, but if you even set aside the fees, you just think about what level of attention to detail as a technician it requires to help a client navigate that. It requires a high level of detail. The only reason I'm saying that to you is partially as a recommended disclaimer of like, I love it. As long as you're detailed and you're going to monitor your stuff and have pretty good idea of where your spending could be cut. And you're truly honest with yourself about whether you'd cut it, which you all strike me as all those to be true.
Well, I hear what you're saying. Though. It's easier to say I'm going to cut my spending from 100K to 75K than actually doing it. So
exactly.
And if you don't have a list of things you're going to cut, then you could find yourself in trouble. So I take that to heart.
Exactly.
I think you have answered my questions for now.
Awesome.
So I don't think I can really go any further without introducing new questions. So it seems like it's a good time for me to cede the stage to the next guest. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Jeff. I really enjoyed the conversation and it's very nice to meet you. And
likewise, I did too. Thank you.
Thank you. Real quick, let me show you the exact 3-pillar comprehensive retirement roadmap that takes retirees from uncertainty to peace of mind that less than 1% of retirees actually have in place. Now, I've built hundreds of these for retirees, and I can say with a high degree of confidence that these are the 3 pillars every retiree needs to have in place in order to have full confidence that they're not missing anything in their retirement plan. And I broke each of these down by the specific questions. You can see them here that each needs to be answered and the best way to answer them. Now, we've done this across pre-retirees, recent retirees, married couples, single retirees, $1 million portfolios, $10 million portfolios, all the above, and it works. And it's my gift to you today. It's absolutely free. It's in the first link in the description below this video. It's going to say free comprehensive retirement roadmap training. Just click the link, enter your info, and you'll get instant access all for free.